And thank you for joining us back in here. Our third keynote speech will explore how countries can choose their own paths in ebooks and audiobooks. He is not only the president and CEO of a global digital bestseller, Rakuten Kobo, but also advises startups focused on aging and technology as chief entrepreneur of Age Well NCE. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Michael Tamblyn to the stage. Thank you.
First, I would like to extend my sincere thanks for the tremendous hospitality of His Excellency Mohammed Khalifa al-Mubarak, and to His Excellency Dr. Ali bin Tamim, and the entire team of the International Congress of Arab Publishing and Creative Industries, who have brought together such a diverse and insightful group of speakers to this excellent event today. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be able to speak with you at the beginning of this week's events, and I know that we're all looking forward to the events that follow. I'm Michael Tamblyn. I am CEO of Rakuten Kobo. There we go. At our heart, we are booksellers. Booksellers who've chosen to focus on ebooks, e-readers, apps, and audiobooks. And when we started in 2009, we believed that with ebooks, the rules were going to be different. That unlike print books, there wouldn't be a biggest ebook retailer of the UK and a different biggest ebook retailer for France or for Japan. That this would be a time of global platforms because the investment, the cost of building and innovating in digital would be bigger than any one market could support. And we wanted to be one of them. So we are now the second largest ebook and e-reader retailer in the world. We deliver ebooks to 190 countries from a catalog of 7 million titles. And we do this as a part of Rakuten, the largest e-commerce company in Japan, who acquired us both because of our global reach and our focus on empowering both retailers and readers around the world. And we are very much in that middle point between the world of paper and the world of screens, with the focus and immersiveness of deep reading, but with the accessibility and portability that technology provides. We were founded in Canada, and if you know anything about Canada, you know that the only way to become a global company is to expand outside of Canada as quickly as possible, and that is what we did. So from the very beginning, we supported multiple languages, different currencies, and payment methods, and now 12 years later, our sales are roughly 1/3 from Asia, 1/3 from Americas North and South, and 1/3 from Europe. And as our markets have evolved, so have our products. We are one of the leading innovators in e-ink devices, pioneering waterproof e-readers, stylus annotations across different sizes of screens, and we evolve our business models, adding audiobooks, all-you-can-read ebook subscription services, which is called Kobo Plus, to more countries every year. And we do this because we are focused on fighting for time for reading against all of the other things that technology can try to pull you towards. We want to focus on the book. We want to focus on the story. We want to focus on the information that authors and publishers can provide. We have 3 competitors that we spend a lot of time thinking about. Fortunately, they're very small, and you probably haven't heard of them. At least there are only 3. So how did we survive? And even more interestingly, how did we thrive, grow, and keep growing with these competitors around us? Mostly by doing things that they could not do. Not because they didn't have the resources or the capital, but because it didn't fit with how they operated as business. We focused on partnerships rather than on competition. We work with booksellers who want to sell ebooks while preserving their relationships with their customers. We work with authors who want to sell their books around the world without getting stuck in exclusive arrangements with particular retailers. We work with publishers who want a partner rather than an adversary. We also create global scale, but with local focus. The tools that we use to sell books, the hardware, the software, the systems, work everywhere. But we build teams and partnerships that allow us to embrace what is unique about each of the markets that we work in. And maybe most importantly, we only focus on books and reading. We aren't trying to acquire a customer so that we can also sell them a television or a USB cable or a new phone or advertising. We just want to make a reader's life better, to help people find great books, to read on whatever device they own. That also takes advantage of making us easier to partner with. Instead of trying to put a bookseller out of business, we want to help them grow in the digital world. We want to grow with them. And in a world where most global content ecosystems are about using books and reading to attract customers for something else, it turns out to be a surprisingly good differentiator if you just do the thing that you're going to do. Being from Canada also shapes who we are. We are comfortable with distance. We are living next to a much bigger, maybe slightly louder neighbor. We bring many different cultures and languages together. It also means that we don't assume that what works at home works everywhere else. We know that there's strength in flexibility and in understanding, and it has also made me fascinated by how other smaller and mid-sized markets work and how they have built digital economies on their own. Specifically the question, what does a successful market look like for ebooks and audiobooks? For those of us who live and work in smaller markets and countries, it can be tempting to look at the biggest countries for examples of how we should work or develop or innovate. But while scale is great, it also is a bit of a free ride. It makes some things easier. A business that works in a population of 300 million may just not work as well at 30 million or 10 million or 100 million spread out over a dozen countries, as some of my colleagues in the first panel pointed out. So for just a moment, we're going to set aside the big digital markets. They are important and they are fascinating, but in so many ways, they aren't really helpful to us as we're trying to figure out strategies that are useful in our own markets. They really do play by their own rules. At Kobo, we don't have unlimited resources. We can't enter every market at the same time, so we have to choose. And when we look at whether or not a market is ready for us, we're really looking at 5 things. We're looking at internet access. Do people have easy access to connectivity and connected devices? We're looking at literacy. Are people reading? Disposable income. Do people have money to spend on reading? We're looking at the quality of personal reading. Do people like to spend some of that money on books and reading? And then especially for us, are there ebooks or audiobooks that are available in digital format that we can sell? Internet access is growing every year, and there are many markets with high literacy rates, and more countries that have increasing levels of disposable income. But these don't all track together. Some countries have high literacy with a focus on education, business, and technical skills, but don't read for enjoyment. We tend to focus on markets where there is some population that likes reading for enjoyment, who likes collecting and buying books for themselves, whether that's for entertainment, for personal education, or for information. But even then, we still have to see if there are books that we can sell. Those last 2 criteria, personal purchasing of books and digital availability, are the ones that are most important to us. And you'll notice that population isn't on this list when we're trying to size the opportunity of digital markets. There are countries of 150 million that don't yet have the conditions for a good ebook market. On the other hand, Storytel is an excellent example of building a perfectly good audiobook business in a country with 10 million people. And Kobo has a very successful business in Netherlands with just over 17 million people. Disposable income, spending on books, and availability of content in digital matter most of all for getting a market like this up and running. Now, we in this room can't do much about disposable income for a country. That's macroeconomics. And we can't change the culture of purchasing books. That's something that moves slowly over decades and is the work of educators, governments, and media, and publishers, and authors. But the availability of digital content is something that we can do something about. And in smaller markets and in emerging markets especially, and by smaller, I really mean any of us who do not live in China, the US, the UK, Germany, and Japan, we really have two choices. We can let our markets be defined by other larger markets. If you're a fan of totally free market capitalism, this may be the path for you. The second option, though, is to make specific decisions to do things differently, to make our own rules. That could involve private business, but also involves governments and industry associations and groups working together to decide what the digital future should look like, and making policy decisions and creating programs that support that goal. If you're like Canada, a small country right next to a very big one, you think about these choices a lot. Sometimes we choose option one. We decided that we weren't interested, for example, in making our own cars. So our cars come from the US and Japan and Korea and Europe like everyone else's. But we took a different approach to culture. We made laws and built programs around music, books, film, radio, and television. We protected languages. We engage in a level of cultural funding, not as much as our friends in Europe, but much more than our friends in the US, because we don't have the economies of scale that they do. We had to decide to have a culture and support it. And the same is true as we made our move into digital culture. And that's what has me so interested here, is in all the rest of the world that doesn't live in giant markets, what are the things that we can do to become healthy, interesting digital economies that reflect the cultures we inhabit? What's interesting is that because we've been working in so many different markets, we've seen many of these programs and policies at work. And some are supported by governments, some by industry, some are a mix of both, but they generally include some of these 6 elements. Wide distribution, the ability for publishers to sell books to every retailer, ebook conversion, the ability for publishers to convert their titles easily and cheaply into digital formats, the availability of aggregators and distributors who could collect ebooks into places that were easy to access, the rise of self-publishing as a service for individual authors, the availability of audiobook production services to make high-quality audiobooks available, and global distribution, meaning the ability for a publisher or an author to sell ebooks in any country where a reader wants to read it. I'm not suggesting that every country or every language group needs to be able to provide all of these things to their book industry to have a successful digital market. But I am saying that the more of these components are available, the more that a market has, the more control of their digital economy they will have. And the easier it will be to encourage better options and more competition for the readers in their market. A perfect example of this is the idea of wide availability. In the print world, a publisher sells to every bookstore that they can. And it would be very rare for a publisher to agree to sell to only one retailer. But this happens all the time in the digital market and is a significant inhibitor to digital growth. We call it the convert and capture problem. Digital retailers love exclusivity if they can get it easily. It keeps other retailers from getting into a market, it differentiates them, and it keeps publishers focused on the needs of one retailer instead of spreading it across multiple ones. Almost every publisher here has probably experienced this at one time or another, where they're approached by a global retailer who says, we want to sell your books digitally. We know that you don't have the time or the capital to convert them yourselves. We will do it for you. And we will keep that digital version on our platform. It will be exclusive to us, But that's okay, because the market's small anyway. And we're just really trying to get things started. We want to help, convert, and capture. The problem is that when the next retailer comes along, the publisher doesn't have that ebook to provide. So they either have to convert it themselves, again, or get another retailer to do that conversion for them, again. Usually what happens is that no retailer ends up with a complete catalog of all of the books available within a market. That harms the publisher, who now only has a book available to sale through one retailer, and it hurts the consumer, who can never find all of the books that they want at one retailer and has to jump between multiple sources to find the book that they're looking for, or more likely, gives up on ebooks and digital formats altogether because it's just too difficult. This can be solved if publishers are making their own ebooks. Not everyone has the capital to do that. Publishers can work with retailers, but structure more aggressive deals so that they get their books back, get them back more quickly, and government and industry programs can make that process easier and cheaper for publishers to get that critical mass of ebooks available. One of the reasons that the English market is as vibrant as it is that publishers did everything possible to avoid ebook exclusivity and make books available to as many ebook retailers as possible, as quickly as possible. It is also, as Rudiger Weisbart said in the first panel, probably the most important thing that can be done to prevent piracy. As availability goes up, as easy access to books on digital platforms go up, piracy goes down. The thing that empowers publishers is access to cheap, high-quality ebook conversion services to convert their existing titles, and then building capacity to make their own in-house over time, with the goal of making sure that publishers can always control their own digital supply chain. An example, two examples of this from medium-sized markets. In Spain, the Enclave project supported the creation of thousands of ebooks from Spanish publishers using government support and private contractors. It built a base of digital assets that then allowed retailers to have a critical mass of titles from the very beginning to be able to start selling, making compelling offerings to consumers. In Canada, the government supported the creation of a not-for-profit organization called eBound Canada. Their job was to select conversion services, test them for quality, and negotiate lower prices on behalf of the Canadian book industry that were lower than individual publishers could get for themselves. There was also some support for conversion costs in the form of grants. As a result, both markets have deep access not just to recent publications, but historical and backlist titles as well. Both of these markets were able to avoid convert and capture for their ebook businesses. Getting books made is half the battle, but especially in smaller markets, it can be difficult for retailers to reach every individual publisher to gather up their digital assets for sale. And small publishers don't want to talk to a half a dozen retailers one after the other, especially when the market is still small. So aggregators and distributors make that process easier and are very helpful for both publishers and for retailers to get the market going. The gold standard example in Netherlands is where publishers cooperatively own their print distribution service, Central Bookhouse, and they expanded that mandate to include ebooks and later audiobooks. That level of cooperation is exceedingly rare, but a version of it also showed up in Italy, where 3 of the largest publishing groups came together to create Edita to distribute not only their ebooks, but also to provide a platform for smaller and mid-sized publishers who didn't want to do that themselves. Then there is the true disruption that sits at the heart of the ebook industry. One of the biggest engines of change in ebooks is the ability for the individual author to send a book directly to a retailer for sale all over the world. And what was originally used just by individual authors is now being used by small publishers as well, who like the easy-to-use publishing and conversion tools that self-publishers enjoy. But what makes self-publishing so important is that all of the experimentation in an ebook market tends to happen in the self-publishing space. Self-published authors experiment with prices, with formats. They break books up and they sell them as series. They're the first ones to try new business models. And they are the first to try all-you-can-read subscription services. They price aggressively. They move into high-demand categories and fill them with new titles. And over time, they produce at a level of quality that is as good as anything that is published by a traditional publisher. And just to give you a sense of how much of a transformation has taken place, in English language markets now, for us, 20 to 25% of all of the titles read in digital are coming from self-published authors. In France, in Spain, in Netherlands, it's 10% and climbing. It's now hard to tell in some cases where traditional publishing ends and self-publishing or independent publishing begins, because they are running sophisticated marketing campaigns, they are in direct contact with their customers, they hire editors and designers to make their work as high quality as possible. And what's interesting is that almost none of this commercial activity shows up on in sort of industry reports, in sales reports today. And because of that, I'll make two corrections to the chart that my keynote colleague, Nicholas Carr, presented earlier. The 78% of the book market that's in print has two things that I'd make a correction to. One, it showed revenue rather than units. And so that sort of overemphasizes the value of print, which sells at higher prices. It was also only coming from traditional publishers. So it was self-reported data from the American Association of Publishers, which means that all of the self-publishing and independent publishing sits outside of that data, which is why we more often hear numbers like 18% of discretionary reading is happening in digital in the US. The only risk with self-publishing, again, is retailers trying to lock authors into exclusive relationships, but that is changing all the time. Both Kobo's self-publishing program and programs that we see across the EU manage to avoid this by giving authors back their ebook files after they've created it, so that they can send them on to other retailers. And we add a high level of additional reporting and business intelligence so that authors can make better decisions about how they market and promote their books. The same is true across Europe. Almost every market now has a self-publishing company that works with all retailers and all authors, providing conversion tools and aggregation and payment services to authors so that they can create their books in one place and then have them sent to all retailers at the same time. What is true with ebook creation is also true with audiobooks. The same need exists to be able to do high-quality creation of content and then have that delivered to as many retailers as possible. Audiobooks also, as my colleague from Storytel so well represented on the panel this morning, creates access to a younger, smartphone-based market that is accessing content at different times of day. And so whether that is driving to work, doing the dishes at home, or exercising, another time of the day is available for reading. There are the same risks as well. Retailers playing convert and capture with audiobooks. The challenge is that while an ebook may cost anywhere between $50 and $200 to produce, an audiobook could be $5,000 a title or more. This makes it harder for publishers to say no to a retailer offering to take on the cost of producing an audiobook in exchange for an exclusive relationship. This extra expense has made it harder for governments to get involved in audiobook creation, so many of the strategies that prevented lock-in in the ebook market weren't used in audiobooks. And so unlike the ebook market, the audiobook market right now is quite fragmented because many retailers pursued convert and capture strategies. In all languages, either converting titles for exclusive sale or buying rights outright has created that fragmentation. In Italy, for example, no retailer has a complete catalog of the best-selling Italian books in audiobook format. They were broken up between competing retailers, and the result is a poorer customer experience all around. The last factor that I'll describe today is global distribution. If a publisher has rights to sell a book globally, they can truly let ebook retailers sell that book anywhere in the world. Just to give an example, almost every country in which we operate, at least 20% of the books that we sell are in a language other than the main language in that country. We sell Spanish books in the US, we sell English books in Sweden, Turkish books in Germany, and so on. We are also able to sell languages that are broadly spread out across multiple countries. A perfect example of this is our experience selling traditional Chinese content. This is the version of written Chinese that is most often used outside of China, found in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and Chinese expats and immigrants around the world. When we first started visiting Taiwan in 2014, the conditions just weren't right. Many of those ones that I listed earlier just hadn't reached the level of readiness that we needed to be able to start selling content there. Publishers were still unsure about whether there was a real market for ebooks, and the books hadn't been converted yet. So we waited. We tried again in 2016. This time the conditions were right. Publishers were ready, there were ebooks to sell, we had retail partnerships, we built a local team, and sales grew quickly. Then we started moving to other traditional Chinese markets, starting with Hong Kong, and now Malaysia, and Singapore, and now we're reaching out to the rest of the Chinese diaspora across many different countries, including the US, Canada, Australia. Publishers are finding sales that used to be very difficult to reach because physical distribution was difficult, moving books around was hard, finding individual small pockets of readers in each individual country was very difficult. And now they can gain those same sales with the same digital file that they created for the home Taiwanese market. So these are the conditions that we look for that make up a healthy, competitive digital book economy. And like I said, these don't all have to be present, but the more that there are there, the better it is for retailers, for publishers, and most importantly, for authors and readers. The good news is, no one has to build these alone. Even with government involvement, most of these services involve the participation of private companies. For example, the aggregators that provide distribution services for small publishers in France, Spain, and Italy are run by the same company, the same service provider who's in Quebec in Canada called Demarc. And the company Findaway is a global aggregator of audiobook who provides do-it-yourself audiobook production and voice talent services for individual authors and publishers all over the world. Where government support can be helpful is getting service providers kind of connected to local markets, whether that's in the form of publisher outreach, supporting software development for local payments or languages, or supporting local staff. It's also important to remember that some things just take time. Like our experience in Taiwan when Kobo first began working in Turkey, we had almost all of the qualities that we were looking for. A literate culture with a strong tradition of bookstores and book purchasing, high internet usage, a rising middle class, but publishers hadn't created digital versions of files yet. So we waited, we worked with publishers associations and retailers. We came back 3 years later to find everything ready, including a retail partner and device distribution. And Turkey has been a successful market for us ever since. With good partnerships, a little patience, and a little bit of faith, we had the privilege of seeing another new ebook market emerge. And in the theme of good things that come to those who wait, I'm pleased to be able to announce that finally, for the first time, Kobo's e-readers will be supporting Arabic starting in Q4 of this year. And that, I hope, will be the first of many steps to greater support for a fascinating and growing market. If I'm lucky, I will get to see many more emergences like this in the future. And I hope that this has been helpful for those making decisions about their own books and their own businesses or the countries and literary traditions in which they live and work. Again, my sincere thanks to today's organizers for the chance to speak with you. It has been my great pleasure to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was very interesting. Your business model is quite fantastic, and I think we can learn so much from you. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have any questions for now, but we had so many interesting ones, so hopefully get the chance to network with you after the event.
They can find me out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, and now our fifth panel discussion is about adaptation of books into audio, film, and games, with the streaming video becoming the main source of content for users worldwide. How can the Arabic publishing industry maximize the appeal of original Arabic content? To discuss this interesting topic, I would like to welcome moderator Michael Garin and speakers Maha Abdallah. Hello. Guys, everyone. Todd Gallicano, Sultan Riyami, and Jonathan Knight. Thank you very much and enjoy your panel.
Thank you very much. And welcome, everybody. We're very lucky to have the panel that is here before you. Hi, how you doing? I will actually just focus as a kind of traffic cop because you didn't come to hear me speak. The whole notion of cultural authenticity and translation is something that's near and dear to my heart. In the film and television business, this part of the world used to be willing to compromise on quality in order to have access to culturally authentic content. But once the streaming services arrived and they saw content from Latin America and Korea and all over the world, they realized that that sacrifice was unnecessary. And there's been a really wonderful trend here because it's put pressure on local producers and broadcasters to provide the quality of content that audiences now demand. But what is true in television and film is true in other media as well. And that's what this panel is all about. And I'd like to perhaps, because I did mention film and television, start with you and let's hear what your experience is and the challenges you face globally, but also with respect to this part of the world in particular.
أحب أقدم شكري بالبداية لمركز أبو ظبي للغة العربية لدعوتي لهذه المناسبة، وأحب أعرف عن نفسي. اسمي مها عبد الله. أنا كنت مديرة اللغات الإقليمية في شركة نتفليكس ومسؤولة الترجمة والتعريب لشركة ديزني بلس. فهذا مجالي تقريبا من 20 سنة في مجال الترجمة والتعريب، وراح أشرح الفرق بين الترجمة والتعريب أو الأقلمة مثل ما نسميها أو اللوكاليزيشن بعد ما الضيوف أيضا يقدمون نفسهم. شكرا.
Thank you. Let's go to talk first about the one field that is global. You know, we see Squid Games. We see The Separation, which won the Academy Award for Best Feature Film about maybe 10 years ago. But 99% of the content in Korea never leaves Korea. 99% of the content in Iran never leaves Iran. Digital and gaming is one medium that is truly global in nature. And we have two people here with experience in creating that. Maybe, Sultan, you can start and talk about the difference between content that works in the local and regional context versus those that travel around the world.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I think gaming really is a universal language. There's no better way to export your culture, your ideas, your beliefs, I think, than through media. And I don't think there's any better medium to do it than gaming. And I understand I'm saying this in a room full of publishers, but that's my take. And obviously, you know, we live in a day and age now where media is really cross-platform. There's no such thing as media sitting in just one space. A book doesn't just stay a book. A movie doesn't just stay a movie. It evolves and it adapts and it taps into many different spaces. And it's an exciting time to be working in this space because through efforts like what my fellow panelist here mentioned in localization, you're seeing more and more of this content become global. You're seeing people export their ideas and their beliefs through content that otherwise would have sat just in one small market, now hit the global stage.
Okay, thank you. And Todd has a slightly different experience to share with us because adapting a well-known book to another medium requires another understanding of authenticity, and it's what you did so well and why you're here today.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm currently
sorry.
That's all right. Currently the general manager for games with the New York Times, but I'm a lifelong game maker. That's been my whole career. When I was at Electronic Arts, I had kind of the crazy idea to take the Divine Comedy, which is a 700-year-old Italian poem and kind of one of the most, I think, famous works of literature to come out of Italy and sort of at the dawn of the Renaissance, and to adapt that into a video game, which actually I found was kind of following in the tradition of 700 years of adaptation and innovation around that particular piece of literature and many others as well. So yeah, it was an exciting, dynamic challenge. We had some level of success and learned quite a bit about, I think, that idea of authenticity and sort of going to the root of a piece of literature and then how to bring that to another medium. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And Todd, you work in yet another medium. Tell us how you deal with this.
Well, I'm sort of kind of straddle both worlds in a way. I started as a screenwriter. I'm still a screenwriter. But I decided to write a book and become an author. And I read an interesting statistic. It said that book adaptations gross 53% more worldwide than an original screenplay. So for a screenwriter, especially in this day and age, we have to take into account that there's less desire for risk. And you know, there was a time when books were adapted, but now there's been a massive boom in purchasing the rights to books from streamers, and they're just buying up IP, right, intellectual property, like crazy, because it's a way also for them to differentiate themselves. And so for me, it was a moment where I had this idea, and I could have written it as an original screenplay potentially, but it had a very deep mythology, and I realized that most places were looking for underlying source material. And so the idea was to create your own underlying source material and then potentially explore it for film and games, et cetera. And so that's sort of the direction I went. And then, you know, so it published by Random House and then wound up getting purchased by Mark Gordon to be made into a film. And then I had to try to adapt it myself. And so it was an interesting experience.
One of the questions about authenticity that I'd like to direct to Maha is not only the portrayal, but the language in which the portrayal occurs. What we are seeing in the more successful, because of the OTT streamers that have come to the industry, that audiences would rather see Korean films with Korean language and subtitles, or Arabic with subtitles. Is that your experience generally, or?
So there are markets that would like to be like dubbed completely. So we call them the dubbing markets.
But the original
Yes. The
film or
original-
television is done in the local language.
Exactly. And there are, just like, for example, the MENA market, it's kind of half-half. So there are people who would like to see content that's not in English originally, let's say Turkish or Korean or Indian. They would like to see it dubbed into Arabic, and not even dubbed to Arabic only, but to some dialects of the Arab region, like, for example, Syrian or Egyptian. There is even dubbing in North Africa, like, for example, Moroccan dubbing in the Moroccan dialect, the Darija. All this is called localization, which means that you are going into the core of your audience. Because if you want to go global, you have to go local. So that's the rule. And when you go local, which means that you are doing all the adaptations needed to make this product looks and feels and sounds local. We don't want to give the user the image that we did not do a lot of effort, or we did not put a lot of effort into the content that they are using. So, and that's what I wanted also to explain about the difference between localization and the translation. In fact, translation is only one part of the localization process. So the translation is when you are translating, for example, a text from the English to Arabic, or from the source to the target, while localization is adapting everything. That includes the user experience, which means the UI. And for example, if, let's say about Netflix, Netflix is an American product. Now, how can I adapt it into Arabic or into, so Arabic is a right-to-left language. All our platforms, the eye of an Arabic speaker catches the right side of the screen, for example. So I need to also adapt the product in a way that it is catching the right side of the screen. And this is how we came up with mirroring. Now, even when I say mirroring, does that mean that I am mirroring 100% of the product? Absolutely not. There are things that we keep, we call them universal, for example. So let's say the play button. Do I have to change it? No. Let's say the progress bar. Do I have to change it? No. So on and so forth. But there are things that I need to change according to my culture here. For example, if in the States they tell me that, for example, the marijuana leaf is something for medicine, is that going to be something that is accepted here, for example, in our region? Absolutely not. So this is the adaptation into a certain culture or a certain locale.
Thanks. And Jonathan, pardon my ignorance, because I'm not a gamer. I haven't played this game, but does this game work primarily in the English language markets, or is it universally accessible?
Well, I would say in the video game industry in general, we have kind of a long tradition. I think maybe going back about 20 years when we really started to kind of crack what we were just talking about, like moving from translation to localization. And so I think, you know, that my game in particular largely worked in Western markets, didn't really penetrate Japan. Like, some content resonates with some markets, and some content doesn't. And so you can only culturalize a game so far before it's just not going to resonate in that market. There's a lot of video games that are very successful in Japan, and they just aren't working in the US, and vice versa. But there are others that do, and it has a lot to do with the gameplay experience and the production values and many, many things. So, but yeah, I agree with the point. You really have to move beyond just the translation into culturalization.
Right. And please go on.
I just wanted to add to that. I think something that's interesting to note is the barrier for entry into the space is effectively been broken down completely. For you to come up with a story, if you have a passion that you need to tell your story, you need to get that out there. The ways in which you can do that now are much more accessible. And why that's key is because if we're trying to export culture, export ideas from our part of the world internationally, we need to enable the creators, the people that have these innate desires to tell their stories, to do so, and to do so on a global stage. And I think you mentioned it. You mentioned it right. I mean, there's some stories that just don't penetrate certain markets, but then there's others that do. I mean, I can tell you this, Michael. I sat through history class for years and years, and I don't remember much. I'll be honest. But playing Dynasty Warriors as a kid taught me everything I need to know about the Three Kingdoms, and that stuck with me because I was the protagonist. I was the main character of my story that I then got to commit to memory a lot of the experiences that I had playing this video game. So I think transitioning from books, from traditional media, things that we originally saw as mechanisms of storytelling, but also mechanisms of education, because these are educational tools that we're seeing in the classroom today. It's a really incredible thing to see.
Absolutely. But when you think about content traveling geographically versus content traveling from one medium to another, I'd like to ask both Jonathan and Todd, do you feel that there are certain compromises that you need to make with the authenticity of the source material in order to make it work in the different media in which you both work, each work?
Well, I would say possibly. I started out working for Dino De Laurentiis, and we had an entire area devoted to international or foreign sales. And everything had to be sort of changed or manipulated, whether it would be the title or the way it was cut. These kinds of things had to be considerations. Nowadays, it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I just wrote a movie, executive produced a movie for Netflix, and the Netflix executive, we sat down and she said, 200 million people are going to see this. And there was a time when that would just not be possible, but now it is. And there was a time also when you would go to, to see a foreign film in the United States, it was kind of, you'd go to an art house theater. Now, the algorithm puts you right into a movie that's from a different place, and suddenly you're watching a movie from a different region. And so, but I think what's interesting about that is that there's more importing into the United States of content than ever before. And what's great about that is that those places, when the United States was kind of the big player in a way for that sort of thing and controlled the content, now you have content creators from all over, and they can represent their culture and their place, their own way. And you don't necessarily have to worry about, you kind of can control the way you're represented, because you're not always, like you can't control the content so much if it's always coming from one place. If you're creating it, then, then you can, especially you can tap into things like fantasy, mythology, myths, folklore that introduce kids through, educate them about a culture. There's just an incredible opportunity for that nowadays.
Right. I'll just quickly share with you a story that I was just reminded of. From 1975 to 1978, I represented the BBC in the United States and Latin America. And this was, in many respects, the heyday of the BBC, all the great series, one of which was Civilization with Kenneth Clark. And it was sold to NHK in Japan. And when they broadcast it, the title was Some Aspects of Western Civilization. And that speaks volumes about cultural translations. Sorry, Jonathan.
And I would only, I guess, add that for games, it is a very different medium because of the nature of the interactivity, where the agency is on the part of the user, the player. They're really taking control, and so you have to be careful. I think there are books that can work as games because the universe of the book, the world, the lore, the history, the environments, are worlds that people want to play in. People want to play in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter universe. They want to play in that universe, but they're the hero. They want to be the hero of the story. And so when you try to sort of jam a pre-authored notion of what a hero might do or not do into a video game where I'm taking control, that's where those, I wouldn't say compromise, more sort of opportunity, but you do need to respect sort of the nature of the medium when you do that.
We'll turn to the audience now, and I'll read two questions that are sort of related to the same theme. The first part is, in a recent article, it was mentioned that game developing companies are seeking authors to build authentic storylines for the games? Is there a rise in game authorship? And the related question that from another member of the audience, how important are books for the game industry? Do book narratives bring a higher value for games?
Please go ahead.
I think what we've seen in the last few years is some of the biggest success stories in the gaming space have come from traditional media sources like books or films. You mentioned the Harry Potter series of games. I mean, for every movie, for every book, and for every movie, there was a video game made that was also enormously successful. One of the best-selling RPG games of all time, The Witcher, started off as a very tiny Polish-only publication that then, hit the global stage because it was just incredibly exciting to be a part of this huge open world and to explore it in a way that you wouldn't otherwise have ever been able to in a book. So it's just another way of evolving media that gives people more access to their favorite content, I'd say.
Yeah, I would add, I think the answer is yes, in large part because there's, as Sultan was mentioning, there's so much opportunity for game creators at all levels. There can be very large companies, but there can be independent game developers, small groups, the garage band of video game development. And so many more people have stories to tell and worlds to create that what people want to play in. I do think it's a specialized skill set, though. I think that a traditional screenwriting skill set does not immediately translate to games. And the demand is really for authors who understand the medium. Yes, games tell stories, and it's really important to build worlds and create believable characters and all those things. But again, it's different because the player is taking control of the narrative and making the choices. And so you have to be able to write for that kind of open-ended experience while still bringing it all in and trying to make a point, have an emotional impact, but put yourself at the center of that story.
Right, and I would just add that we're very lucky to have 4 panelists who are experts in what they do. And I say that because from the outside, our industry looks easy. People go to movies, they say, oh, I had that idea. They go to watch a television show, yeah, I thought of that, or a game, or everything. But this is an industry that's just as hard getting the idea from your head to the paper and from the paper to the screen. And it takes years and years and years of very hard work. And I just am very appreciative of you taking the time to share your experiences with us because you've been through that whole process. And thank you very much. The next questions, the screen turned off, but maybe oops. One of them, here we go, are for Todd and Maha. I'll read them both and you can kind of share the answers. About adaptation of content to a specific region, if parts that do not fit a culture are cut out, is it really fair to the story being told? Or should we accept content of other cultures as is? And the second question for you both is, the localization of movie production conducted by Netflix, is it generating a better dialogue with publishing industry and books?
Would you like to?
All right, so the first question about changing the content. I think there are times when that, for example, I mean, there was something that when the books were published in Germany, and they wanted me to change something in the end to clarify something, and it was, that was fine. That was totally fine. And the considerations of that sort for me, it's about educating. It's about getting your content to travel to tell the story, and there are aspects of that you have to take into account with any culture and what's culturally sensitive. And that's why I think that's why I was talking before about how creating your own content is really just the best way to do that. I mean, there's a reason why Marvel's movies do so well all around the world. Why? Because they follow the same paradigm, And there's these, and just like games that have heroes as the main characters, what's the one thing we've learned, right? Joseph Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, it's the same story but a different face, that those speak to a common human experience and these collective sort of, dreams and nightmares. And those are the kinds of things that you can tap into stories, and you don't have to worry about, having to change your content because they speak to everybody in a way. And then the next question, you want to go ahead on that question?
It was about whether the fact that Netflix is now bringing more local productions, has that changed the role of book publishing, providing access to content and production?
So the way I see it, for example, for the first question, let's go back to this one. For example, for a company like Netflix, they do not believe in censoring at all. But they are willing to discuss if there is something that's going to have a really negative impact on, for example, a certain market. After all, they don't want to lose markets. So I can bring one example is the title Messiah, if you guys remember it. So it was a title that was, I think it was aired like 2 years ago. And the word Messiah by itself, according to our Muslim faith, it has to be Messiah, which means Al-Masih. Now, the plot of the show, or the main character of the show, the whole idea is whether he is the Messiah or not. So just to call him the Messiah, that means I'm giving him, that person, the credibility and the authenticity that this is the person. This by itself is a big issue. Now, how do we work around this? That's the most important thing. How do I convince Netflix that maybe that this title is not the right title to go with? So this is how we go, for example, into discussing maybe we should go with other titles. That's why we ended up calling this title The Man of Miracles, which can mean anything. Another thing, for example, for the same title, we discussed with the author or with the creator of the show, the script itself. So there were, for example, verses from the Quran. How can you go there and make sure that the pronunciation of the verses are the correct way, in the correct way, they are pronounced in the correct way? So all these are things to make, these are sensitive issues, but at the same time, this is things that you can discuss with Netflix, let's say. And you can discuss also with the creators of the show. It's all about communicating to them that this can really create an issue that we can avoid by going this route, for example. So this is how,
Right.
yeah.
And I'll try to address, but correct me if I'm wrong, because you have more direct experience, the question about the publishers and that the vast majority of content, be it from Korea or Latin America or elsewhere, that you see on Netflix starts as local productions and then is acquired by Netflix.
Yes.
Very little original content is generated, so that the relationship between producers and writers and publishers of source material still remains pretty much a local affair. It hasn't changed that much in my experience.
And particular streamers as well are more about acquiring rather than original content. Right. Apple has that aspect to them, and others as well. So, Netflix does a lot of originals. They're probably pulling back a little bit now, but that was, but then they do acquire. They do,
From my experience, for example, one of the best hits, even here in the MENA region, is La Casa de Papel, or El Profesor, which maybe many of you watched this show. It's a Spanish show from Spain. And it was licensed content at the beginning. So season 1 was licensed. When it proved to be a really big hit, Netflix immediately bought this as an original content, and now it's aired on Netflix as an original Netflix series.
Thanks. We just have 2 minutes left. Do any of you want to say anything to wrap up the session?
So I would only like to shed some light on the localization here in the MENA region. we all know about translation, but localization is not something that we are not there yet, in fact. So for me, for example, from my own experience when we were launching Netflix in Arabic, it was very hard for us to find the right translators to do the work. So we were not looking for translators, we were looking for localizers. And that was a big challenge for us because most people, most translators that are not familiar with not translating, but designing a product in Arabic, for example. How do you convince the creators of a product in English to make it in Arabic? What are the changes that needs to be made to make this product, for example, looks and feels local? So I think what we need here in the MENA region is more training for the translators, making them think as localizers, not as translators. The pay rate also is one of the things that's very important. There are 1 or 2 countries only in the whole MENA regions that are controlling the localization industry or the translation industry. While the American companies, for example, they need more diversity. They need different perspectives from the region. When I wanted to have someone to transcribe plays in the Gulf dialect, it was very hard to find anyone to do that. So all these are missed opportunities that we definitely can work on, giving training and improving the localization equality for the MENA region. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Point, and we had talked about this, that family genre of content. As a content creator, that's kind of my thing, is family, and that travels. You don't have to worry, that travels, and everyone wants that sort of 4-quadrant kind of story, right, that the whole family can watch, and that's a big one.
Well, thank you so much for, oh, I'm sorry, go on, John.
No, I was just going to make one last. I would really encourage a connection between books and publishing and the video game industry. Just quickly, the story that I remember the most from doing Dante's Inferno was after the game came out, you would think that there would be some anger from, more book people, literature people, that we had done this, turned this great work of literature into a video game. But in fact, I got so many letters from teachers who said to me, thank you for making Dante Alighieri relevant again, for my students to learn something about him, to be introduced to this work of literature through this young medium. And so I think that I would just encourage that. There have to be incredible stories from this region, from this culture, that works of literature that could be introduced to new audiences through the vehicle of games, worlds that people would love to play in. So I think I would just encourage that connection.
Right.
I can also just, I don't think we want to talk. Sorry, if I can just, piggyback off of that. I think the one thing I want to make big note of here from this panel is that, we've heard of amazing success stories like La Casa de Papel or Squid Game go international, and it's because the creators in these countries are given the tools that they need to succeed. And we've created these programs here for local creators that are interested in trying to get their stories told, to have them done through any medium, whether it be through books, through film and TV, or through games, or all three. So, just make sure to look out there if this is something you're interested in, and we're here to support.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Michael, and our panelists. That was definitely a very insightful discussion. And so many, let's say, opportunities has been risen from these challenges, and hopefully we can address it together in the very near future. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, our last panel discussion before an amazing hot fireside discussion, also going to be having at the end of the Congress. This panel, we're talking about new digital platforms facilitating content creation and publication, we are left wondering, are digital platforms the future of publishing? To tell us more about the transformation of the readers of today into the authors of tomorrow, please welcome moderator, once again, Ed Nawotka, and speakers Giacomo D'Angelo, Muhammad Labban, and Alan Lee Janey to the stage. Nice having you back.
Hello again, good afternoon. And as somebody who learned most of his history by playing Assassin's Creed, and I really enjoyed the previous panel. So that's certainly one game I know a lot of people have used, and they think they've learned Middle Eastern history from. My name is Ed Nawotka. I'm, again, the international bookselling editor at Publishers Weekly. And I've worked on a video game. I worked for Ubisoft and co-wrote one of the latest Ghost Recon games based on a Tom Clancy novel. So if anybody wants to know what it's like to co-write one of the biggest failures of Ubisoft's history, I'll be happy to tell you a bit about that. We're going to talk in this session about the new author. And essentially, we've alluded to this a lot today about the idea that creators are empowered. There's been a democratization in the book business and in publishing and in media overall that the gatekeepers have fallen because digital media has given the power to the people. And our panelists have each experienced this in their own individual way. And we would like to talk about this in the context of global publishing, but also in the context of the Arab world. I'm going to, again, follow the same format we've followed before, allow each of our panelists to introduce a little bit about themselves and their work. To my left is Giacomo. Next to Giacomo is Muhammad, and then Alan. And we're going to start with, why don't we start with Alan, just to give yourself an introduction, since you are primarily a self-published author. And you can tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how this actually happened.
Sure. My name is Alan. I live in Virginia, in the United States. I write mysteries and thrillers, and I publish most of them myself. I was going to a writers' conference a few years ago in 2014, and did not know authors could publish themselves. I was a teacher, and teachers get to hang out with each other in lunchrooms and teachers' workrooms and be friends, and I never did that. I was writing, because I wanted to be a writer. And I think writers just write, even if nobody's going to pay them. And that's one of the good things about self-publishing. And this gentleman, his name is Hugh Howey. I did not know who he was. I did not realize he was selling millions of copies. He politely suggested maybe I don't meet with this agent that I was about to meet with, and maybe I look into self-publishing. And I did. And I published the books myself, and it went really, really well, and I've been doing it ever since. Earlier over lunch, Ed asked, do you have a side job to support your writing? And if I had signed with the agent and gone the traditional route, I would probably still be a teacher, and I would be publishing my own books, or I'd be a writer on the side. But instead, I do it myself, and it's my full-time job.
And, okay, we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back and find out what that really means. And Muhammad, could you tell us a little bit about your background and Quora? And maybe people aren't as familiar with Quora as they are with some platforms. So if you could give a little bit of context for Quora and what it does for people, how it empowers writers.
أنا اسمي محمد اللبان. أنا بشتغل في بلاتفورم اسمه كورا. كورة هو يعتبر بلاتفورم للأسئلة والإجابات. تعداد المستخدمين اللي موجودين على حسب آخر إحصائيات تم إعلان عنها في 2019 أكثر من 300 مليون مستخدم حول العالم. كورة دلوقتي متاحة ب 23 لغة. العربية كانت من أواخر اللغات اللي تم إطلاقها في المنصة من حوالي تقريبا 2 و3 4 شهور. أنا بحب أعرف نفسي إن أنا بناء مجتمعات. يعني في ناس كتيرة اتكلمت النهاردة حوالين how to build a community، إزاي يبقى عندك المجتمع بتاعك عن أي محتوى أنت بتقدمه بأي شكل من الأشكال المختلفة. أنا دوري بشكل أساسي بحاول إن أنا أشجع المستخدمين للإنترنت العربي بشكل أساسي إن هم يشاركوا المعرفة بتاعتهم على الإنترنت. وده كان حاجة مهمة جدا لأن المحتوى العربي على الإنترنت قدامه أشواط كتيرة علشان خاطر يبقى يعني في المساحة اللي احنا كلنا بنأمل إن هو يكون فيها بشكل كبير يعني. كان عندنا واحد من أهم التحديات اللي بدأناها في كورة لما أطلقنا النسخة العربي هو الناس هتكتب إزاي؟ يعني الوطن العربي عندهم احنا عندنا لهجات مختلفة يعني سواء في المغرب العربي سواء في مصر في الشام في الخليج. فاللهجات المختلفة كانت واحد من التحديات الأساسية اللي واجهتنا أول ما أطلقنا النسخة العربي. فكان واحدة من السياسات اللي اشتغلنا عليها هو فكرة توحيد اللغة الرسمية. فبالتالي أي حد عنده أي سؤال على كورة واحد من الشروط الأساسية إن هو يسأل السؤال باللغة العربية الرسمية علشان خاطر أي حد من الوطن العربي يقدر يجاوب عليه ويقدر يشارك المعرفة واللغات بتاعته. ودي حاجات ممكن نتكلم عليها بشكل مستفيض أكتر بعد كده.
Excellent. And Giacomo, a little bit about yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Giacomo from Italy, Milan, Italy. I'm the CEO of StreetLib. And at StreetLib, we enable publishers and creators to distribute and sell their digital books and digital audiobooks across a network of more than 70 retailer partners all around the world. So part of our job is really to enable individuals and self-publishing authors, which is the topic of today's event, to be participating in the global marketplace. And so we provide them the tools and services they need in order to create beautiful books and very well, high quality audiobooks. And then, to manage metadata and then to access and to tap into all these opportunities that are available around the world. There are many retailers. In addition to the big ones, there are so many opportunities in Europe, in the US, but also in other countries around the world. And so our job is not only to intermediate, to platforms like Amazon, Kobo, Google, Apple, etc., but also to go after new opportunities, new business models, and facilitate, all the, publishing workflow for publishers and creators.
Giacomo, how many authors do you have on the platform or in the ecosystem?
Yeah, we have about 25,000 authors active on the platforms, and we manage about 500,000 titles.
So that's 24,000 authors
individuals.
And 500,000 titles.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But we also have more than 1,000 publishers.
And if you were to rank that in Italy, what size would that make you? Where would that place you behind, let's say, Feltrinelli, or not Feltrinelli, I'm sorry, Rizzoli, or one of the bigger publishing houses, Mondadori?
In terms of sales?
Yeah, well, in terms of volume, because I
So,
think sales is a little harder,
Yeah. So we are definitely smaller than them. So in Italy, we manage about 150,000 Italian titles.
Okay.
That's where we sit. But of course, there is a long tail of content. So of course, 80% of the sales are made by less than 20% of the content. And so, and this is also our main characteristics. You know, we want to be very inclusive, so we don't have any upfront cost like many other platforms. So we enable everybody to, you know, to play a role, and you know that's important as well.
It's open, is what you're saying.
Yes, and you know we are a tech platform, and so we strive to be very scalable and to be very able to serve as much people as possible without requiring them to sell a lot. Even though we are happy if they sell, because you know we usually work in a revenue share agreement with our content providers.
Okay. This is going to be, I'm going to try to organize this in a way that makes a little bit of sense, but it's going to be hard. But in Quora, you have 300 million users in 29 languages. But the platform is primarily based on, initially it was questions, correct? Somebody would post a question, people would reply. Has the platform evolved from that original way of writing into something more like a Wikipedia, something that's more that you can query and get answers back? Can you tell me more?
بالتأكيد يعني كورة الأصل بتاعها كان هو مبني على السؤال هو أصل كل الأشياء ف يعني الناس بتطرح الأسئلة بتاعتها في مجالات مختلفة وفي إجابات كتير جدا من سواء متخصصين أو ناس عندهم معرفة أو خبرة بالجزئية بتاعت السؤال تحديدا فبيقدروا يشاركوا الإجابات بتاعتهم. مؤخرا في برامج كتيرة كورة عملتها يعني مثلا بقى في برودكت أو منتج اسمه المساحات فالمساحات هي عبارة عن ميزة بتخلي مجتمع معين أو متخصصين في مجال معين بيشاركوا معرفتهم مع بعض بشكل أساسي من خلال كتابة منشورات من خلال إن هم يطرحوا وجهات نظر مختلفة من خلال إن هم يركزوا في المساحة بتاعتهم حوالين موضوع معين فمثلا في الكورة العربي في مساحات كتيرة مثلا مرتبطة بالأمن الرقمي والسايبر سيكيورتي وطرق الكتابة والكتابة الإبداعية وهندسة كهربائية يعني مواضيع كتير جدا مختلفة وكل الأشخاص اللي بيديروا هذه المساحات هم ناس متخصصين في المساحات دي ودي نوعية محتوى في اللغة العربية يعني مش موجودة كتير الناس اللي هم يعني أنت مثلا لو تقرأ حاجة مرتبطة بشكل مبسط جدا حوالين الهندسه الكهربائيه مثلا في ناس بتقدر ان هي توصل المعلومات اللي هي very sophisticated ومعقده جدا لناس ما عندهمش خبره كبيره جدا بالتخصص ده ان هم يفهموا ده اكتر وده بيولد مساحات جديده ان الناس تقدر تتشارك مع المعرفه بتاعتهم. كمان كورة مؤخرا عملت برنامجين within او يعني في اطار الكرييتور ايكونومي اسمه في برنامج اسمه كورا بلس وده بيسكلي هو بدأ في اللغة الإنجليزية وهنتوسع فيه في لغات تانية وفي مناطق مختلفة من العالم وبشكل مبسط هو بيخلي المستخدمين يبقى فيه نوع من أنواع الثبات الدخل المادي بالنسبة لهم فالناس اللي هم بيبقى عندهم معرفة أو بيكتبوا كتابات بشكل مبسط جدا للناس فبيخلي إن المشتركين يقدروا إن هم يساندوا ويدعموا الناس دول من خلال السبسكريبشن او الاشتراك ودعم الكتاب دول باشكال مختلفه وكمان في برنامج تاني اسمه كور سبيس بروجرام وفكرته الاساسيه ان هو بيخلي يعني انت ممكن تدعم مجموعه من الناس متخصصه في تخصص معين بحيث ان هم يقدروا يكملوا ويستمروا في انتاج المحتوى وينشروا بشكل اكبر وفي استمراريه اكتر.
And just so we're clear, this is all meant to be non-fictional, correct? This is not a platform like Wattpad where people are publishing fictional stories, make-believe. This is meant to be fact-based, yes?
الحقيقة هو بيغطي كل المجالات يعني مش بس الحاجات اللي هي زي ما تسمى فاكتس لا يعني بالعكس يعني في مثلا في مساحات مرتبطة بالكتابة الإبداعية فهي المساحات دي بتدي ورك شوبس وورش عمل للكتاب ان هم يبدأوا يحكوا الحكاوي بتاعتهم بشكل مختلف. وفي مستخدمين كتير بيشتغلوا مثلا في صناعة السينما ففي كتاب سيناريو في authors actually يعني كتاب تم نشر كتب ليهم في مجالات مختلفة بيساعدوا الناس ان هم يطوروا الاساليب الكتابية بتاعتهم من خلال ورش عمل ان هم يجاوبوا على الاسئلة بتاعتهم المرتبطة بالمجالات المختلفة فهو بيغطي كل التخصصات وكل المجالات مش مرتبط بفاكتس معينة.
Okay. Because it's very interesting, just looking at the history of self-published work, that it's very much favored fiction in the traditional form. In the formal publication form, fiction has worked very, very well in self-publishing. But in the casual online writing form, if you want to call it, I'd like to call it more casual because it's a little more improvised. Nonfiction or fiction, or not, I'm sorry, nonfiction or fact-based material has been much more successful. And it's interesting because now you have the challenge, and then we're going to ask Alan, we're going to go right into the fiction, but now you have the challenge with Cora of how do you make sure that the information is good information? Do you validate it? Do you, because Wikipedia always has this challenge, right, which I think is a kind of direct competitor. How do you validate the information that's there, or is that left to the users to validate?
فكرة الفاليديشن مرتبطة أكتر يعني إحنا في كورة بشكل أساسي أنت لما بتيجي تعمل حساب أحد الحاجات الأساسية إن أنت لازم تملى البروفايل بتاعك في credentials اللي هي المؤهلات أو الاعتمادات. فبالتالي أنا لما مثلا أسأل سؤال مرتبط بالطب مثلا لماذا لا يصاب القلب بالسرطان كمثال يعني فأنا لما ألاقي إن في واحد في البروفايل بتاعه هو طبيب أصلا متخصص مثلا في أمراض السرطان أو في أمراض القلب وكاتب حاجة حوالين الجزئية دي بشكل أساسي فده بيدي كريديبيليتي للمحتوى والمعرفة اللي هو بيشاركها بشكل كبير يعني وبالتالي إحنا دايما بنحاول ندعم الكتاب في كورة إن هم يشاركوا المعرفة بتاعتهم اللي هم متخصصين فيها بشكل كبير.
Fair enough. And Alan, you write mystery novels, correct?
Yes, I do.
Can you describe now you started off writing young adult, but you moved into mysteries.
That's right.
Is there a particular reason, can you describe the milieu of your mysteries? For example, have you killed anybody? And,
yeah, we kill people.
So we can validate you have the authenticity to be writing these murder mysteries. That's great.
Well, I've never killed anybody yet.
Okay, good to know. Okay. I'm just curious. How did you make this transition, and why did you settle on mystery as a genre? Because as a self-published writer, did you anticipate success in that field, or was that something that you decided was the one that best suited your skill set?
I grew up reading mysteries. I love a good detective there's an awful situation in a detective.
What kind of mysteries do you write? I mean, for those of us who aren't familiar with your...
Sure, somebody is dead. Who did it?
Okay. And is it always the same detective?
I have a couple that I return to over and over again.
Okay.
Fans really like them, so...
Okay, because there's a theory in fiction that says with nonfiction, readers they expect you to write one book, and they figure you're an expert, and they don't want you to write the same book over and over again. With fiction, readers more or less want you to keep writing the same book over and over again because they want to be able to predict what they're going to buy. Has that been your experience? Has that helped your success as a self-published writer?
Yes, and I can't do it fast enough.
How fast do you write?
I can write 2 or 3 books a year, and I get emails every day saying that's not enough. So I'll sit down and try to write 2,000 words a day.
Okay.
And that works out to 3 books a year or so.
And is that, as far as the pressure goes, because that is 3 times the output of a typical mystery novelist. Does that feel like a frenetic pace? Because 2,000 words is a lot of writing. I say that as an editor.
I get up in the morning and I can't wait to go to work.
Okay.
I have the best job in the world. I tell stories and people give me money for it. It's the best. And so I don't feel rushed. Something I've learned since I've been doing this is the guys who do 1 book a year, they do it in 6 months, and then they play golf the next 6 months. They could do more.
So they're lazy.
They might be a little lazy, but it's working for them.
also, I mean, all of you can maybe address this. Sherif earlier today had said that there's a joke in Egypt that we have more authors than we do readers. And I've always joked, this is not even a joke for just Egypt. In the United States, they did a survey 15 years ago and asked how many people felt that they had a book in them to write. And it was over 90% of Americans surveyed felt that they could write a book. And I'll tell you though, 90% of Americans don't read books. And so to what extent has that been your experience, that everybody you meet, I've got a story to tell? And this was alluded to in the earlier panel too, where the gentleman who's the moderator said, so many people say, oh, I came up with that idea, or I have this idea. But the execution is what it really seems to come down to.
I was on a news program once. They were interviewing me about the books, and when it ended, most of the news anchors called me in the hallway and said, hey, we've always thought about writing a book too. And so I get that a lot. And so I'm always being pitched ideas. What do you think about this one? And that's what's great about digital content. So I've been told the MENA region is about like 10 years behind maybe where the United States is in terms of self-publishing, which means maybe in 10 years there's going to be a whole bunch of guys like me here who can do this themselves. Some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be not great, but anybody who wants to do the work to tell a story, get it down, will be able to publish it. And that's better than the story staying in a drawer and nobody reading it. It's good to be published.
And Giacomo, you can confirm this. People, the message of this panel is there's no excuse anymore. There's an excuse when somebody says, oh, I had a great idea for a television series, and it doesn't get made because producing a television series requires a tremendous amount of money, a team. I mean, the barriers to entry are lowering to that too, as we've seen. But to really publish and globally distribute, which is what you offer, there's no excuse anymore. If you want to do it, you really want to do it, you can do it.
Yes, absolutely. It's very easy and it's free. Even though we strongly support independent authors who are willing to invest in their work, because it's also important for us to promote high quality books, and the package should be very good, the cover, and I mean the product itself should be really professional. So we also help creators to make the most of out of their stories and books. But yeah, so if you want to go straightforward, and it's very easy and free, but the more content there are available out there, and the more you want to be able to produce very good quality books.
And you have books, you have work in Arabic.
Yes, we have work in Arabic. We have about 1,500 titles in Arabic. I checked a few days ago on our platform. And and we have a long list of languages that we support on our platform. We have books in more than 140 languages. Of course, the majority are in the English, German, French, and Spanish, and Italian, but we have a long tails of content.
For somebody, I mean, if Alan comes to you and says, I want to publish my books in Arabic, is this something that you can help with? Or how does this process work then? Because now you're taking the publisher out. You're taking Sherif out of the equation. He translates books, publishes them in Egypt. But if you want to have the transaction, because I think this is what we're ultimately talking about making happen.
Yeah, so basically we work both with creators and with publishers. We provide a digital books infrastructure that enable organizations or individuals to make their books available, their digital books and digital audiobooks available in as many places as possible around the world. And so then we have built a platform which provides multiple services for filling publishers' needs and independent publishers' needs. So for instance, we can connect Alan with some translators that we have in our larger teams. And then if Alan needs, some help in producing his audiobooks or his ebooks, marketing is, we have very strong relationships with all our retail partners.
Yeah.
So we can facilitate, marketing activities and promotional activities for our authors and publishers. And yeah, that's what we do.
Well, because it's interesting, because you use the word institution, and I'm looking at the Arabic Language Center, and I wonder to what extent could the Arabic Language Center, in this world that we live in now, set up its own, and they have done, obviously, with their translation program, but if they want to publish in Arabic, this is something that any institution could begin to do with the right resources. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Mohammed, you've worked in numerous countries, including Saudi and Turkey, if I'm not mistaken, and the United States and the Emirates. Those experiences, how does it differ, the acceptance culturally of self-published work? Or of the author as their own publisher? Because I know it's taken a long time in the United States for people to accept that. In the United States, I think really what validated self-publishing was money. 50 Shades of Grey was self-published in Australia originally. Colleen Hoover, who in my earlier panel on TikTok was mentioned, was initially a self-published writer. She's now one of the biggest authors in the United States. Money validated that. How about, what's been your experience working in the different countries with the work with Quora and your experience professionally?
في الواقع يعني كل مجتمع وليه الدوافع اللي بتخليه يكتب بشكل كبير. يعني لو هتكلم تحديدا عن تجربة المجتمع العربي على كورة، في ناس كتير جدا من تخصصات مختلفة هم حريصين للغاية ان هم يكتبوا محتوى عالي الجودة بشكل كبير، ومحتوى أصيل، مش محتوى مكرر أو محتوى منقول من أماكن تانية أو محتوى متاخد نسخ بس علشان يتحط. لأن كمان السياسات اللي احنا بنستخدمها في كورة، يعني في واحدة من السياسات المهمة عندنا ان هي ضد البلاجيرزم، ضد النقل من غير ما يبقى فيه كريدتس للشخص أو المحتوى اللي أنا أخدته من عندي. يعني في ناس كتيرة اتكلمت على موضوع البايرسي which is طبعا موجود، ودي أزمة كبيرة جدا موجودة، بس في المحتوى النصي كمان في أزمة البلاجيرزم، إن الناس بتاخد المحتوى ده من غير ما تدي كريدتس للكتاب الأصليين لهذا النوع من المحتوى. يعني أعتقد إحنا كمان كمجتمع عربي بنحب فكرة المعرفة، إن أنا لما بقى عندي معلومة معينة بحب أستفيض في الشرح بتاعها، بحب أوضح جوانب مختلفة كتيرة منها. السياسة اللي احنا حطيناها في كورة المرتبطة بالمودرن ستاندرد Arabic أو اللي هو اللغة العربية الرسمية ساعدت ناس كتيرة جدا وشجعتهم إن هم بيشاركوا المعرفة اللي عندهم في مجالات مختلفة، لأن هم متأكدين إن الناس اللي هتقرأ المحتوى بتاعهم مش مرتبط ببلد معينة بلهجة معينة، لا هو يعني على طول الدول المتحدثة باللغة العربية بشكل كبير. يعني فالدوافع كمان مرتبطة بفكرة يعني حد يبقى عنده credibility، عنده التاريخ بتاعه في الكتابات بتاعته. الناس بتبقى حريصة ان هي تبرز المعرفة اللي عندها على اساس ان ممكن مثلا يجي لهم شغل او يجي لهم يعني نوع من انواع الدعم العملي وطبعا المادي من خلال الكتابات بتاعتهم في المجالات المختلفة. يظل ان في تحديات كتيرة جدا في المنطقة العربية مرتبطة بالقوانين والاجراءات اللي ممكن تسهل ان يبقى في دعم فكرة الكرييتور ايكونومي بشكل اساسي عند الناس، ولكن احنا في الطريق لده. وفي ثقافات كتيرة بتتولد يعني خلال ال10 سنين اللي فاتوا. فكرة السبسكريبشنز، يعني من 2008 2009 لما كنت تيجي تقول لحد مثلا ممكن ادفع فلوس عشان اشترك في اونلاين سيرفيس، كان الناس بتقعد تتريق وتهزر. دلوقتي لا، ده بقى موجود وواقع. لسه قدامنا فيه خطوات كتيرة على مستوى يعني السيرفيسز او الخدمات او الببلشرز اللي بتطلع سواء بشكل نصي بشكل صوتي بشكل فيجوال، ولكن احنا في الطريق الصحيح لهذا المسار.
It's interesting just because again, we're going to jump into the Q&A, but I'm just curious because Egypt has I believe, the largest population of speakers. I know on Quora, when I look, there's a lot, it's often dominated in the US by Indian writers because there are many, many Indian writers using it in English. Do you have this issue in Arabic with Egyptians taking over the site?
بالطبع يعني احنا اكبر عدد مستخدمين في كورة عربي، رقم واحد كعدد مستخدمين من مصر، وتاني حاجة السعودية، وتالت حاجة العرب الموجودين في أمريكا، ورابع دولة الإمارات، وخامس دولة الجزائر. فيعني البوبيوليشن وايز بتاع مصر طبعا مدي مساحة كبيرة جدا ان المصريين يكونوا كأعداد هم أكبر ناس مستهلكين ومستخدمين في نفس الوقت للنوع ده من المحتوى على كورة بالعربي.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. Thank you. We have questions now for our Q&A. Alan, the question was asked, would you now sign a traditional publishing contract, or under what circumstances? Maybe a better question not is would you, because I think the immediate answer would be no, but under what circumstances or what would have to change for you to sign a traditional publishing contract?
It would have to be very author-friendly.
What's that mean?
I would like to be paid a lot of money. I would like a lot of control. I was just thinking about this. One of my manuscripts is sitting with some agents right now, and they're taking forever. And I know if they sell it to a publisher, it's going to take even longer. And part of me just wants to go to my hotel room and publish it myself tonight, and then send my email list out and sell 10,000 copies before breakfast. That's how much control I have right now.
That's a lot.
So I have one of my good writing buddies is maybe the best-selling romance writer on planet Earth right now. Her name is Lucy Score. I don't know anybody who's sold more books than her in the last few months. Publishers and agents are running after her.
Her name again?
Lucy Score.
Lucy Score.
Lucy Score. She has like 5 books right now in like bestseller lists. She's just selling. She's going to sell like, it's just her and her husband, and she's going to sell like 5 million copies this year. So imagine the deal that she's going to demand if she's going to sign with somebody. And I'm not quite, on her level, but it'd have to be pretty author-friendly, if that makes sense.
Is this sustainable? I mean, that's always one of the questions. One of the things that publishers promise is to stick with you through thick and thin. I mean, is it sustainable? Is the pace of production? Because we talked about Hugh Howey. Hugh Howey made a lot of money as a self-publisher. He also published traditionally. His book is in, I don't know if it's in turnaround, but they're taking a heck of a long time to produce it as a movie or TV series. I know some trailers have been announced. And now he is sailing his yacht around the world. Yeah. But will we ever see a book from Hugh Howey again? Maybe, maybe not. I do believe he has one coming out this year. But just out of curiosity, is that sustainable as a career, or does it even have to be at a certain point?
I hope so. My literary heroes, some of their series are 40 books long. And so I haven't hit a wall yet. What makes it so sustainable is I collect email addresses. One of the tricks up my sleeve is that I will give my readers bonus material in exchange for their email address. And so anytime I want to publish something, I just email them, and I sell to them immediately. I could just, like Michael with the Kobo, I just, hey, the book is now out on Kobo, and they'll just all go get it because I have their email, and that's very relational, and I think that's very sustainable.
Okay. Absolutely, Giacomo.
Money is a big piece of this, but I want to stress about the control, because I don't know how much sustainable it's going to be, but the control is going to be, in my opinion, a trend which is going to stay. So as authors, they want to have control over their publishing process. So now, thanks to technology, thanks to our platforms, what they can do, they can just decide, the price every day. They can plan, promotional activities. They can, reply and be very responsive to their audience, in any ways. And they can control, the sales and the revenue streams from all the channels in a very understandable way. And this is true also for publishers, because now those tools are also available for publishers, and so also publishers should be able to be, very, very transparent with their own authors. So this is a big step forward, in my opinion, in that direction.
This kind of dovetails with one of the questions here is, when you talk about control, it's interesting because what's really missing from this conversation is China, actually. Because China is the biggest, by far, self-publishing market in the entire world. It's an astronomical business there. And part of the reason it is so is cultural. There's a lot of cultural circumstances. There's a lot of money involved in it. But it also gives people, they felt a degree of freedom over there to publish in a way that they wanted to. And what we've learned since is that when the Chinese government wanted to stop this, to end this freedom, it was no longer, there was no longer such an option, and there's been a lot of money lost. And you talk about freedom, but at the end of the day, and Michael Tamblyn, you allude to Writing Life on Kobo, which is their self-publishing platform. To what extent do the creators really own their content if the distributors are responsible for distributing the content? And to what extent are you vulnerable to changes in the way Amazon does business, or Quora does business, or StreetLib does business? And anybody can answer this. Or, because there's no guarantee, obviously, that these are going to persist in the same ways that they are. Where a book is a book is a book, and has been a book for a very long time. That technology doesn't evolve, but it also doesn't disappear. And
quickly answer,
yes, sir.
From our
Please do.
perspective.
Yeah.
So as StreetLib, we don't ask for any exclusivity, and we strive to make a distribution agreement with authors and publishers in order to align our interest with their interest. So as long as we sell authors' books, we make money otherwise. So we are forced to do a good job with our customers' IPs, and of course, we are just acting as a distributor, and there is no minimum, terms and no exclusivities. So our authors and publishers can just withdraw their items, their books or digital books or audiobooks as soon as they want, basically.
And I'll go to Alan as opposed to Mohammed, because I think that's a hard question for Mohammed to answer. But Alan, how do you feel about it? Do you feel vulnerable to changes in the way Amazon decides to start paying out money, or Kobo, or any of the other distribution platforms?
Sure. Who doesn't feel vulnerable about their
Amazon
career
in general?
income? But I'm not only on Amazon, so that does make me nervous to have all eggs in one basket.
No, of course.
So that's a great thing about Kobo and Amazon and all the others, iBooks, StreetLib. As far as I know, I own all of my rights except for when I sell them. I don't like doing audiobooks myself.
Right.
So I get pitches to buy my audiobooks, and I usually will sell those, and then I don't own those anymore. Mm-hmm. Somebody else owns them. But for the most part, I own my work.
And on Quora, do the creators own their own work exclusively? Can they then transfer that to other platforms if they want to?
بالتأكيد يعني احنا كمان عندنا نماذج مختلفة من بعض الكتاب على كورة جمعوا الحاجات اللي هم كتبوها كإجابات أو منشورات على كورة ونشروها في كتاب سيلف بابليشنج. يعني هم المحتوى بتاعهم بشكل أساسي يعني وطريقة الملكية أو طريقة استخدام المحتوى ده من قبل الكتاب نفسهم هم طبعا أحرار فيه بشكل كبير. بالعكس احنا بنساعد بشكل مختلف في التوزيع بتاع الكتابات بتاعتهم. يعني في احد البرودكتس بتاعت كورة اسمها المختارات او الدايجست، فاحنا بنساعد الناس ان هم المحتوى بتاعهم نوزعه على الناس اللي عندها اهتمام بالموضوع او بالكتابات اللي المستخدمين دول بيتكلموا عنها بشكل كبير.
Excellent. We only have 30 seconds left, so instead of asking the final question I was going to, which is, what do people typically get wrong about this industry? I'm going to let somebody from the audience ask that over the next coffee break. But I just want to emphasize our gratitude for having this opportunity to share our expertise with you on this very, very important subject, one that cannot be ignored any longer and must be respected, I think. It's also something that is important to note that is very democratizing. So there's a great validity to that. I want to thank again the organizers for putting this together. I want to thank Giacomo, Mohammed, and Alan for their time and their generosity traveling from the United States. Two of our panelists and one from Italy, and me also from the United States. And please take advantage of our presence in the room outside, ask questions, get involved. I'm sure that anything can be accounted for if you have a question or curiosity. Thank you once again, everyone, and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you so much, Ed, and our panelists. This was very interesting. That was quite a hot topic, and seeing the different interesting opinions when it comes to publishers and private publishing also quite interesting. It's amazing how the panelists have covered the entire ecosystem of our discussions today, from publishing to creative industries. Thank you once again. We have one more hot fireside discussion, and this will be our last discussion before we end the day. So, as I mentioned, our program is almost done for the day, but before we leave, we have one last hot fireside discussion. Discussion is all about good quality Arabic content on the internet is limited, and trusted sources are very difficult to find. Our interviewer, Nafis Daqqaq, managing partner at Work and Learning Venture Studio BLDR, will ask our speaker and founder, Executive Chairman of Majarra, Abdussalam Haykal, all about what the future holds for the Arabic content on the internet, and I cannot wait to hear more about it. The stage is all yours. Thank you.
لا بس اوكي. It's on, right? Do I need that? No. I don't need that. Okay, perfect. بالعربي أكيد صح؟ عربي أكيد تمام. مرحبا، مساء الخير. شكرا كثير عشان صبرتوا معنا لآخر اليوم، وإن شاء الله رح تكون حوار شيق مع الأستاذ عبد السلام، اللي هو أنا برأيي الشخصي من أعمدة صناعة المحتوى العربي في الإمارات وفي المنطقة. عبد السلام، نبدأ دائما بنحكي أنا وياك على المحتوى العربي الجيد، وخلينا ندرة المحتوى العربي الجيد، وطبعا في كثير ناس تطرق لهذا الموضوع، بس الواحد لازم يسأل حاله يرجع شوي، شو يعني محتوى عربي وشو يعني محتوى عربي جيد أو قيم؟ شو سماته؟ شو خاصياته؟
عظيم. فرصة طبعا طيبة نكون معكم اليوم، وبدي أتشكر مركز أبو ظبي للغة العربية وسعادة الدكتور علي بن تميم على تنظيم المؤتمر المميز جدا. فعلا المحتوى في هذا المؤتمر، عودة لكلمة محتوى مميز ومفيد وموثوق من أصحاب الخبرة مباشرة. إذا بدي أنطلق من هون للإجابة على هذا الموضوع، اليوم الناس تذهب إلى الإنترنت لعدة أسباب. تبحث عن منتجات تبحث عن أخبار، تبحث عن معلومات عن أشخاص، تبحث عن وصفات طبخ، وتبحث عن كل ما يتعلق بإرشادها في حياتها. يعني سؤال مثلا كيف أشعر تجاه أمر معين، أو كيف أتطور في وظيفتي، كيف أتعامل مع زميلي. أمر في التكنولوجيا سمعوه في الأخبار يريدون البحث والاستفاضة فيه، يعني أن يقرأوا أكثر عنه. هذا المحتوى محتوى مفيد، محتوى يساعد في نموهم، يساعد في نموهم، يساعد في تطورهم، يساعد في امتلاكهم زمام حياتهم. ليش شو معنى المحتوى الجيد هنا؟ محتوى موثوق من خبراء، له مرجعية واضحة، مبني على خبرة أو مبني على تجربة، رقم واحد. رقم اثنين، مقدم في قالب يعطي تجربة مستخدم مميزة. يعني اليوم جزء من مشكلة المحتوى العربي برأيي هي أنه أغلب المواقع التي تدخل عليها شكلها أشبه بغابة، غابة من الألوان، غابة من القوالب للنصوص، غابة من الفونتس العربية اليوم الموجودة أونلاين. يعني قد يكون لها سبب مباشر في إبعاد الناس عن القراءة، متعبة لعيونهم، لا تساعد في مقروئية الكلمات وما شابه. إذن الأمر الثالث هو الاستدامة. يعني أنا يجب أن يكون لدي ثقة كمستخدم أني يمكن أن أعود إلى هذا الموقع غدا وبعد غد والأسبوع القادم والشهر اللي بعده لكي أستقي منه هذه المعلومات وهذه الفائدة. قضية أنه اليوم بنشر أو غدا ما بنشر، أو اليوم معي تمويل غدا ما معي تمويل، أو اليوم عندي كاتب غدا ما عندي كاتب، عندي صانع محتوى جيد هذا الأمر اختلف غدا. عدم الاتساق في هذه العملية وعدم الاستمرارية هو يخفض من جودة المحتوى. إذن هي جملة عوامل لا تتعلق فقط في المحتوى. المحتوى، طريقة عرضه، تجربة المستخدم في استهلاكه وفي استخدامه وفي استدامته. هذه بشكل عام الأمور التي أعتقد أنها تشكل الجودة وهي مفقودة في أغلب المواقع العربية وبشكل عام في المحتوى العربي.
ممتاز ممتاز. ممكن ندخل أو نركز شوي على موضوع بخصنا إحنا كلغة عربية، كمواطن عربي بيعيش خلينا نقول ازدواجية لغة. فالمحتوى العربي الجيد هل يجب أن يكون باللغة العربية الفصحى، أو هل بنفع يكون بالعامية سواء كان لهجة إماراتية، لهجة شامية، لهجة مغربية؟ وطبعا في محاولات كثيرة في ويكيبيديا عربي، وبعدين في ويكيبيديا مصري، في ويكيبيديا بالدارجة. فأنت شو رأيك؟
يعني هذا موضوع شائك وهو موضوع أنت مختص فيه.
لا مش
أكثر
مختص
مني.
أنا موضوع مهتم فيه.
موضوع، لكن اللي أنا بقول لك أنه هذا الأمر المحتوى له جمهور في النهاية، وأي مؤسسة تنتج محتوى تنتج هذا المحتوى لجمهور. يعني أنا ضد فكرة أنه نحن ننتج المحتوى بتعالي على الناس. يعني أنا أعتقد أنه العالم لازم تقرأ بالفصحى. إذا جمهورك يرغب بالقراءة بالفصحى ويفيده القراءة بالفصحى فليقرأ بالفصحى. لكن خليني نقول أنا اليوم مثلا عامل موقع إنترنت عن شوارع أبو ظبي، يرتبط بتاريخ الإمارة، يرتبط بنقاط معينة. هذا إذا كان باللغة الفصحى جيد، إذا كان باللهجة العامية الإماراتية جيد. إذا كان الجمهور يستهلك هذا المحتوى دون إشعار المتلقي بأنه أنت خففت من قيمته باستعمال لهجة محلية فلا مانع. لكن لا أعتقد على سبيل المثال إذا قدمت محتوى طبي باللهجة المصرية الجمهور سيثق بهذا المحتوى بشكل كامل. هناك محتوى له سوية أعلى، مطلوب منه موثوقية أعلى، العالم تتوقع، الناس تتوقع أنه يكون بالفصحى لأنه هي اللغة الرسمية يعني اللي نحن اعتدنا عليها. هذا توقعي، ما فيني أقول لك لا، لكن اللي بعرفه أنه المحتوى يجب أن يقدم لجمهور، والجمهور يقدم له المحتوى بالطريقة التي يرغب فيه.
يرتقيها. ممتاز. منحى ثاني، يعني خلينا لما نقارن ببلدان أخرى أو بمناطق أخرى، بلشت طفرة أو بدأت طفرة المحتوى الناتج من قبل المستخدمين اللي هو user generated content. احنا عندنا بالعالم العربي المحتوى الجيد هل بينفع يكون أو هل يصلح أن يكون من المستخدمين، ولا ما زلنا نحتاج أن يكون من مصادر معينة؟ ما تقول مصدر موثوق، هل هذا المصدر ممكن يكون شخص ولا لازم يكون مؤسسة؟
برأيي هذا السؤال من أهم الأسئلة الموجودة. الشخص إذا كان الشخص تحول إلى مؤسسة ويضمن الاستدامة فهذا أمر عظيم، لكن المحتوى لكي يكون موثوق يحتاج إلى عملية خلفه. يعني إذا كان الشخص، هل نعتقد مثلا أنه ممكن يكون، لنفترض شخص ينتج محتوى طبي، هو قادر أن ينتج المحتوى الطبي ويضعه على الإنترنت ويضعه في قالب معين ويستخدم أفضل صيغة للوصول وينشره عن طريق نشرة ويدققه لغويا ويدققه من ناحية مصداقيته الطبية، هذا أمر شبه مستحيل أن يقوم به شخص. لكن هل يمكن لشخص أن يقدم معلومة طبية مثلا على سناب شات أو طبيب يعمل سلسلة على تويتر؟ طبعا ممكن أن يقدم هذا الموضوع، لكن أي حدا منا اليوم إذا هو بده معلومة طبية هل يبحث على تويتر على هذه المعلومة الطبية؟ يعني هو صار معه ألم معين أو بده يفهم حالة قريب أو صديق، بدور على تويتر؟ أما لا، يبحث على الإنترنت، وأغلب ما ينشر على الإنترنت هو يجب أن يكون من مؤسسات. أنا مع اليوزر جنريتد كونتنت من خبراء، لكن بالنهاية أن يكون موجود ضمن مؤسسة أو أن يحول الشخص نفسه إلى مؤسسة. يعني اليوم مثلا بعض من أفضل وأكبر مؤسسات الكونتنت في العالم هي مبنية حول أشخاص، لكن هي مؤسسات مبنية حول البراند الشخصي، يعني حول نفسه لماركة.
صحيح.
لكن هو وراء مخرج، وراء منفذ، وراء مسوق العمل الفردي شبه مستحيل بقضية معقدة مثل الكونتنت، وإذا نجحت لفترة معينة فهي غير مستدامة.
تمام. نركز أكثر على موضوع الاستدامة. أنت دائما تحكي لي عن أهمية نعمل صناعة محتوى عربي، اندستري كصناعة. أنت برأيك شو أهم، أو من خبرتكم بمجرة هلا، شو أهم نماذج الأعمال، البزنس موديلز اللي ممكن تخلق هذا النوع من الصناعة؟ بعرف أنت ما بتحب كلمة دعم، بس اللي ممكن تدعم، أو ما كنت قلنا كمان ليش ما بتحب كلمة دعم، ممكن تدعم هاي الاندستري، هاي الصناعة بالمحتوى العربي. هل هي الاشتراكات؟ هل هي الدعايات؟
يا سيدي أنا ضد كلمة الدعم في منطقتنا تحديداً، لأنه هي أدخلت حالة الثقافة والأدب وما يتعلق باللغة العربية بما في ذلك المحتوى بحالة من عمل الخير، وبالتالي عمل الخير اليوم ممكن أن يتوجه لهذا القطاع، بكرة يتوجه لقطاع آخر، وهو لا يبني صناعة، لا يبني قطاع. القطاع يحتاج إلى لاعبين كبار. أي قطاع في العالم تحكمه ثقافة الدكاكين ليس قطاعا. الدكان مهم، من المهم وجود دكان في رأس أي حارة أنه يخدم حاجات الحارة الأساسية، لكن هذا الدكان لا يمكن أن يطور احتياجات المستهلك، لا يمكن أن يعيد الاستثمار في منتجات جديدة، لا يمكن أن يوصل لك المنتج مباشرة إذا أنت طلبته نحن ليش بنقول اليوم نحن بحاجة إلى لاعبين كبار؟ بما في ذلك في قطاع النشر. يعني قطاع المحتوى العربي على الإنترنت هو جزء من قطاع النشر. اليوم لأضرب لك مثال، أنت بتطلب كتاب أونلاين بيوصلك بعد 5-6 أيام، تطلب منتج من أمازون بيوصلك ثاني يوم. ليش نحن نفترض أن المستخدم يتوقع أن تكون تجربة شراء الكتاب مختلفة عن تجربة شراء منتج من أمازون؟ من حيث المبدأ نحن يجب أن نقدم نفس تجربة المستخدم. تطبيقك اللي أنت بتشتغل عليه كمنتج محتوى، كمؤسس محتوى، لنفترض أحد الجرائد عنده تطبيق، المستخدم لا يقارن تطبيقك بتطبيق جرائد آخر يقارن تطبيقك بأوبر، يعني بيقول لك تطبيق أوبر سهل وبسيط ومباشر وأنا عندي علاقة جيدة معه، ليش ليكون تطبيق الجرائد أكثر تعقيداً أو ما بحسه ما بيفهم علي إذا اليوم في توقعات عامة في القرن ال21 قرن التكنولوجيا تجاه تقديم الخدمات، تجاه تجربة المستخدم، تجاه تطوير هذه التجربة بشكل مستمر. الصناعة تقوم بهذا الموضوع، لأن الصناعة تستثمر بشكل مستمر، ترفع المعايير بحيث أنه بصير عندك منتجين أفضل، قوالب أفضل للإنترنت، فونتات أفضل، فونتس أفضل على من فونتس عربية، بصير عندك قدرة على التفاوض سواء مع قطاع الإعلان مع غيره بشكل أكبر، لكن هذا بحاجة إلى مردود. نموذج العمل الصحيح برأينا للأمام هو أن تقوم مؤسسات المحتوى على المحتوى المدفوع، ما يسمى بالعوائد من المستخدمين، user revenue. يعني أنت اليوم تعرف أنك تستهلك شيء له قيمة وتسدد قيمته. في السابق كان المعلن هو من يدفع عنك. المحتوى بعمره ما كان مجاني، إما الحكومة تدعمه أو الإعلان يدعمه أو الاشتراكات تدعمه. تقديري أنه جزء كبير من مشكلة المحتوى العربي هو تقلب هذه الأمور. يعني اليوم نحن بفترة الحكومة ترغب في دعم مشروع معين فهي بتدعمه لمدة سنة، بيخلص الدعم أو بتتغير الأهواء أو بتتغير الأولويات بيختفي المشروع. الإعلان يتقلب بالدورات الاقتصادية، وبالتالي أنت علاقتك غير مباشرة مع المستهلك، كمان بتأثر على بقاء هذه المؤسسات واستدامتها. لكن إذا بتشوف النموذج وين تطور، بدنا نشوف الدول الأخرى وين وصلت، هي عم تعتمد على عائدات الإعلان، عائدات المستخدمين، وبالتالي عن الاشتراكات. لكن لحتى توصل للاشتراكات هذا السؤال، كيف تقدر تقنع المستخدم إنه يدفع ليشترك؟
وهذا بيخوضنا للسؤال التالي اللي هو هل المستخدم العربي متعود أو مستعد يدفع الاشتراك، أو اللي أنا بشوفه زملائي مش دراسة بحثية بس إنه لا، المستخدم العربي بحب كأي مستخدم بالثاني بس متعود على المحتوى يكون مجانا. يعني في عندي كثير أصدقاء رياضيين بيعمل تطبيق عليه محتوى إلى آخره، بيحاول يعمل عليه سبسكريبشنز، بنقال له لا، ما حط إعلانات وأعطينا المحتوى مجانا. فهل أنت بتشوف إنه عقلية أو تفكير المستخدم العربي ممكن تتغير تختلف مع الوقت، أو هل لكم أنتم دور كصناعة بتغيير هاي الفكرة؟
سؤال عظيم. أنا برأيي ما في حدا بيفضل إنه يدفع لأي شيء بالواقع، يعني محتوى أو غيره، أي شيء بتقدر تحصله مجانا فهذا أفضل. بالشام في مثل بيقول شو أطيب من العسل؟ خل ببلاش. فهذا القطاع رح يبقى موجود يعني، والناس بتفضل دائما، بتلاقي الخيارات الأفضل الأرخص والأقل كلفة. متطلبات الحياة صعبة، يعني ما عم نقولها إنه الإنسان عم يسترخص، لا، بس الواحد بده يوازن شو بدفع. لكن اليوم هي بالنهاية أي منتج موجود بالسوق سواء كان جديد أو قديم هو بده يسد حاجة معينة عندك إياها، بده يعطيك قيمة معينة. بعضها يتطلب تغيير عادات. تغيير العادات ما له سهل، خاصة أنه أنت اليوم في الإنترنت العربي في عندك عدد كم هائل من المحتوى المجاني والمحتوى لكن بنفس الوقت سيء. يعني نحن ما عم نحكي على محتوى لغويا سيء، لكن محتوى أول شيء غير موثوق في مصدر معلومته، رقم 2 في قص ولصق وقرصنة لها أول ما لها آخر، رقم 3 في كثير من الأحيان هو يوزر جنريتد ويؤدي أو يروج لقيم نحن في مجتمعنا نسعى للابتعاد عنها أو التخلص منها. بدك تقنع المستخدم بحالة جديدة بقيمة جديدة، يجب أن تقدمها بقالب متكامل كمنتج، محتوى أنت بحاجة له في حياتك، في مهنتك، في عملك، مع أسرتك، محتوى أنا أضعه أمامك. يعني أنا ما عم بالأخير والله عم أنتج كتاب وحطه في الدرج وبعدين عم أقول لك تعال أنت لاقي، لا أنا عم وصل لك إياه، عم أعمل ديستريبيوشن الصحيح، عم أعطيك تجربة مستخدم ممتازة، وبالتالي عم أدخل آليات القطاع الخاص إلى هذا القطاع، عم أدخل آليات البزنس من تسويق، من مبيعات، من تقديم قيمة عالية في المنتج، ومن ثم بدك تساعده ليعمل هذه النقلة. تجربتنا أنه نحن لما بتعمل هذا الموضوع في مجرة، اليوم عندنا آلاف المشتركين المدفوعين، مو آلاف المشتركين المسجلين، آلاف المشتركين اللي بيدفعوا شهرياً أو سنوياً للدخول إلى المنصة وبيجددوا، والكثير منهم فعلاً بيجينا رسائل حب، رسائل حب حقيقة مع قلوب حمراء، مو قلوب زرقاء أو قلوب
دائما إن
بيضاء.
شاء الله.
إيه؟
دائما
قلوب حمراء بيقول لك إنه أنتم ساعدتوني و المستخدم العربي برأيي في هذا الموضوع لا يختلف عن المستخدم العالمي. هناك نقلة عالمية في حالة السبسكريبشنز بعد كوفيد وقبل بعد رواج الفيك نيوز. صار المستخدم يسعى انه انا بدي مصدر معلومه موثوق، بدي تجربه مستخدم جيده، بدي اخذ قيمه من الوقت اللي عم اصرفه على الانترنت، واذا انا بقدر اشتري هذا كلياته بسعر مقبول، وهذا تتمه الموضوع، مو سعر خارج نطاق امكانيه المستخدمين في المنطقه، فهو انت بتساعده انه يعمل هذا القرار.
جميل جميل. عندنا سؤال من الجمهور بدي احاول ادمجه مع سؤال انا كنت حابب اسالك اياه. هلا انت ما شاء الله زي ما قلت عندكم الاف عشرات الاف المستخدمين المسجلين بيدفعوا شهريا سنويا لمجره. شو ممكن يعني او شو بيعني لمجره خلينا نقول للقطاع بشكل عام، قطاع المحتوى العربي، لو منصه زي مجره وصلت لمليون مستخدم؟ كيف هذا ممكن ياثر على الايكو سيستم بشكل كبير؟ والسؤال من الجمهور انه احنا بنحكي انه بدنا نعمل صناعه، هل بتتعايش هاي الشركات الكبيره مع اللي انت سميتهم مثلا الدكاكين، ولا خلص ساعتها رح نتخلص من الدكاكين المحتوى الصغار او اليوزر جنريتد كونتنت؟
سؤال مهم. رح بلش من السؤال الثاني. لا، الدكاكين موجوده وستبقى موجوده، القرى موجوده وستبقى موجوده، لكن هذا لا يعني أن نقبل بثقافة التي تنتجها الدكاكين، لا يعني أن نقبل بثقافة التي تنتجها القرى. كله له دور، لكن ما يؤدي أن تتطور الحضارة إلى الأمام هو الديناميكيات والتفاعلات اللي بتنتجها الأعمال ذات الطموح الكبير، يلي فيها تحدي كبير، يلي فيها رهان كبير، يلي فيها استثمار كبير، يلي فيها جمع لمواهب الناس الأفضل في مجالهم. هذه الدكاكين لا تستطيع أن تنتجها. لكن هل للدكاكين دور؟ طبعاً لها دور. أنا لا أقصد بفكرة الدكاكين هي اليوزر جنريتد كونتنت، لا أقصد فيها شخص تطوع ومسك على سناب شات وقال أنا بدي فيدكم بالشيء اللي بعرفه. أنا قصدي فيها المؤسسات يلي هي تبقى ضمن إطار صغير. نحن سيبقى القطاع فيه غالبية من هذا القطاع. المشكلة قطاع المحتوى ليست بوجود الدكاكين، مشكلة قطاع المحتوى هي بغياب اللاعب الكبير. هذه المشكلة هي هون. ونحن بحاجة لصنع شركات كبيرة في المحتوى. رح أضرب لك مثال على هذا الموضوع، ولو أنه عم نذكر اسم شركة، لكن التلفزيون العربي قبل MBC هو غير التلفزيون العربي بعد MBC.
صحيح.
MBC أتت رفعت المعايير، استثمرت استثمار كبير، طبعاً مع الوقت وتراكم ونشحت في هذا الموضوع، رفعت سوية الإنتاج في المنطقة بشكل عام، أدخلت التلفزيونات العربية في منافسة لرفع هذه المعايير. لكن قبل كان هناك محاولات وكان هناك العديد من الدكاكين. عودة لسؤالك، إذا نحن عندنا طموح في مجرة للوصول للمليون مشترك، ماذا يعني أن يكون هناك مليون شخص يدفع اشتراك لقراءة المحتوى؟ يعني هناك وجود شركة حققت المعادلة، وبالتالي عملت كيان تجاري كبير في قطاع المحتوى، وبالتالي استثمرت في المحتوى، استثمرت في تجربة المستخدم، أنتجت أجيال وأجيال من الناس التي تعمل بهذه السوية العالية من العمل المؤسساتي، أدخلت القطاع كله في منافسة إيجابية تجاه هذا الموضوع، ويبقى أن نبني على هذه القصة. طبعاً غير أنه مجرة بتكون نجحت يعني بعملها أكيد، لكن بالإضافة أنه مليون شخص استفادوا من هذا المحتوى، وربما الملايين حولهم من عائلات وزملاء استفادوا أكثر، وربما ألهمت الشركة شركات أخرى أن تنشأ في هذا القطاع.
إن شاء الله إن شاء الله. لا وبالتوفيق. كثير حابب أختم بهاي النقطة، بس في سؤال كثير مهم بتوقع أنا من بعض أو أحد الحضور، اللي هو نرجع ننوه لفكرة أنت حكيت عنها، هي موضوع الفونت أو الخط العربي. في كثير محتوى عربي أونلاين حالياً بنكتب بخط، ولكن الخط زي ما أنت قلت ما في حدا راضي عنه، فشو السبب؟ ونكون هذا آخر سؤال لأنه أظني طولنا على الجمهور.
السبب أنه هذا قضية الفونتس هي مثل قضية كل شيء يتعلق بالمحتوى. بالأخير الفونت يحتاج إلى زبون، يحتاج إلى حدا يشتري. اليوم لايبريز الفونتس الموجودة أونلاين في منها كثير مجاني، لكن الشركات التي تنتج فونتس هي تبيعها. اليوم عدم وجود سوق لهذا الموضوع لا يؤدي إلى الابتكار فيه، لا يؤدي إلى رفع السوية فيه. وهذا الأمر يلي نحن بنقول بمجرد بدنا نعمله. يعني نحن اليوم سيكون لدينا دخول إلى هذا القطاع، مساعدة في تحسين الفونتس، وكان لنا مساهمات في الماضي في هذا الموضوع، لكن مو بس فقط في موضوع الفونتس. الفونتس عالقة في زمن سابق. الفونت العربي الحديث هو كله تنويعات على الكوفي، والكوفي غير صالح للقراءة برأيي، لقراءة نص كامل. يعني عدا عن ذلك الكتب اليوم لا تنشر بالكوفي، لكن نص الديجيتال للأسف في الويب سايت هو أغلبه يميل إلى هون. نحن علينا نافذ أن نسعى. هذا قطاع صعب، هذا قطاع في نمو كبير، ما زال فيه فرصة لأنه قطاع صعب، لكن نحن علينا أن نسعى. بالشام بنقول تاجر ومنجم ما بيجتمعوا. إذا عندك تجارة، عندك أمور محددة لازم تقوم فيها لتنجز. ما فيك تنجم شو بده يصير، لكن أنت بتعمل اللي عليك، تبني البناء الصحيح، بيكون عندك الرؤية الصحيحة، بيكون قلبك في المكان الصحيح، عم تعملها لغاية صحيحة وسليمة. وأنا برأيي نحن بالنهاية ممكن إنه نوصل. لازم نعرف وين بنقدر نوصل، لأنه إذا كل ما بنقدر نكمل بالمسيرة هي إلى الأمام، معناتها حتى اللي بده يجي يكمل بعدنا بيكون بدأ من نقطة أبعد. فعلينا نحن المحاولة، خاصة أنه على الأقل لقينا أنه هذا نموذج العمل للاشتراكات في مجرة بمحتوى عالي بالشراكة مع مصادر عالمية هو مفيد، قابل للنمو، وجاذب للاستثمار، وبيبقى أنه نقدر نكمل بالتحالفات يلي عم نعملها بهذا الإطار.
إن شاء الله منها للأعلى منها، ومن طلب العلا فأكيد مشواركم طويل إن شاء الله.
سهر الليالي.
سهر الليالي.
شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا شكرا كثير عبد السلام، شكرا للحضور، شكرا لمركز أبو ظبي للغة العربية، ونلقاكم في محاضر أخرى إن شاء الله.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you so much نافذ. شكرا عبد السلام. يعني كل كلامك كان مقنع، ختامها مسك عن جد. أنا أعطونا بكل شيء قلتوه. وحيكون في كمان another subscription على مجرة بإذن الله اليوم. أنا فعلا كان حوار رائع جدا، حببني باللغة العربية أكثر وأكثر. شكرا، يعطيكم ألف عافية. شكرا. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, thank you so much for being with us today. It has been truly a very insightful day, learning all about new opportunities, solutions to our challenges, and best practices, and how we can foster sustainable growth of creative Arabic content regionally and abroad. We truly hope you have benefited from the extensive knowledge that we have shared, and we look forward to seeing what we can create together by next year's Congress. My name is May Sayed Ali. It was my pleasure وشرف لي اني كنت معكم اليوم. Thank you so much. يعطيكم الف عافية. شكرا.